Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to what has been going on in Pakistan and what has been part of a lot of controversial debate, especially with regards to the ouster of the regime of the PTI founder, in which, of course, there was many claim that was made with regards to the involvement of a US-led conspiracy in the country to take him out of power. And this was something that has been talked about much in rallies, and then of course as part of a trial that is also underway with regards to, of course, a cipher that was allegedly talked about on multiple occasions by the PTI founder as evidence of the US involvement in his ouster from power, something that of course was denied repeatedly by the US as well, and then of course by the investigations that were subsequently taken by the government of Pakistan as well, and of course the ambassador in question. Right now, of course, we've seen another reiteration of that matter in a US congressional hearing in which Mr. Donald Lu, the Assistant Secretary of State, said that this is complete falsehood and it's a controversy and it's a lie that was propagated by the PTI founder, and that the US has not been involved in any such matters and does not deal with any such matters at all. And he's also clarified his own stance that this is not something that was part of any sort of content or diplomatic cable. And so this is important, especially with regards to the way that this has impacted the political dynamics of the country and what this means in terms of what the PTI has talked about and has led the public to believe. There is also, of course, concern with regards to denies by the current PTI chairman as well, claiming that this is something that needs to have an open investigation, that there needs to be an open trial of the matter, and has also asked the ambassador of Pakistan to the US in question, that was also a part of this entire controversy as well, allegedly by the PTI, claiming that this was of course something that was sent to him by Mr. Donald Lu, and has asked Mr. Majid as well to move forward with a clarification on that matter and to come forward in response to Mr. Donald Lu's statements. He's of course testified earlier as well, but this is something that the PTI is calling for again. So we're going to try and explore in further detail what this particularly means for the political dynamics of the country, and how then we're going to move from here in terms of the calls for open investigations, and what sort of link will then be established with the kind of hearing that is going on in the US. There is, of course, also other matters that were discussed as part of this hearing. The most important ones, of course, with reference to Pakistan's elections, in which Mr. Donald Lu has also stated that the irregularities that have been observed need to be looked into by the Election Commission of Pakistan, something, of course, that the Foreign Office has also responded to, saying that this represents a misunderstanding of the political dynamics of the country, and others have also pointed out as blatant violation of Pakistan's sovereignty. So we're going to take a look at that in further detail as well in our first segment of the show. Our next one is going to be focusing on what has been going on within India, especially with regard to the dynamics of the alleged murder attempt against a Sikh member of the United States. And this is, of course, something that has followed from what has happened previously in Canada as well, with, of course, the US calling for investigations into the matter. An Indian formed committee, of course, looked into the matter, and this particular investigation team based in New Delhi has now come out with this investigation report, claiming that the individuals involved in this rogue operations were not part of any state elements, and that they were rogue operatives that were involved in this attempted murder. Of course, what exactly is the formation of such an investigation, what is the credibility of these reports, and how then these are going to be looked at in terms of calls of action made by the US, and what it means, especially with regards to justice on ground, is something that we'll explore further and see what can be done on that front. That is going to be our focus in the second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. And for our first segment, we've been joined online by Dr. Jamil Khan, who's a former ambassador, and we will be joined shortly by Mr. Anwar Iqbal as well, who's a senior journalist. Thank you very much, everyone, for being part of the debate, as always. And I'll start with you, Dr. Jamil, with reference to, of course, what has been stated by Mr. Donald Lu. Firstly, with regards to the cipher case, of course, he has been part of this controversy and has been in the limelight because of that as well. He's, of course, stated very clearly that whatever has been claimed by the PTI is utter falsehood and is not true at all. This is, of course, something that has impacted Pakistan's political dynamics a lot. What do you make of this statement and what it means in terms of the impact that it's going to have on the undergoing trial?
Donald Lu, first time, any official of that level, Assistant Secretary General of the State Department, United States, has given a statement and has described everything what has been earlier debated and discussed in the media and otherwise. So first time on the oath. So that has its own value. It has its legal value because the Congress and the House of Representatives, they have their standing committee and the subcommittee, which is normally which comprises of the experts of their house. And from that standpoint, it has its constitutional legal value. It is formulated under the rules of business of the United States Congress. And then whenever they call anyone, the subcommittee or the committee calls anyone, whether it's a government official, a citizen, or any outsider to testify certain facts or certain um, um, controversy, then in that case, if someone tells lie or if misstatement, make misstatement, that has its own consequences. So therefore, it has to be taken in the more serious manner than previous statements, what has been given at various platforms. So that Donald Trump had been very diplomatic and was very clear in his thoughts while he was questioned and while he made his initial statement. For example, he did say that yes, once he was asked questions, that yes, there were some irregularities, but about 30 years ago, also, once Donald Lu was here in Pakistan, he found that those irregularities had happened, and he also emphasized that there is a right forum, which is election commission. Once he was confronted with the question that do you ask for the investigation of the electoral process during this 8th February election, he said, yes, the investigation is already being taken place by the election commission, and they are the forum, they are the judicial forum, which would be investigating all irregularities. And in past, Donald Lu says that there have been re-elections in certain constituencies. So there could be whatever they decide, the election commission accordingly, they will take their decision. Yes, he did drop a hint that there was some harassment to the journalist that was noted, and also he praised the process of election. Donald Lu, that this time the turnout was really very huge, 60 million people, and this time the woman folk also came out for the electoral process. He did mention about the human right, some of the human right, the religious freedom, the blasphemies, because they wrapped it up so many other aspects during this hearing of the subcommittee of the Congress. So from that point of view, Donald Lu, whatever questions he asked, he was, although diplomatic, but very clear. Clearly, he did ask, responded, including the cipher issue, which was talk of the entire media and which has been a controversy for the last so many months and years. So he did very vehemently denied that this is nothing more than a conspiracy. And then, in fact, on your show also, I have been stating about it that Official Secret Act is so comprehensive, although it was drawn at the time of British regime, but uh, anyone who discloses the contents or even discloses the details of any details of the cipher, which is the telegram, what we call, can come under the ambit of Official Secret Act 1943, Section 5. So that way, I think the legal process is one part. The second is that the U.S. now has very clearly the Assistant Secretary General, who was alleged to have said certain things which he denied, and he has denied under the oath. So I don't think Pakistan are the people who were demanding for such testification can do much about it, because he was very clear in his statement. He did also wrap it up by saying that Pakistan, once he was asked this question, that what is the future of the Pakistan and US relations, he was very candid on that, that we would like to support Pakistan, we'd like to maintain our relations. We've been having relations for the last 76 years, and we are helping them out in the economic difficulty, in the investment. And he did also mention some of the impediments which the investors they feel, and which was right, which was he was very correct, that the red tapeism and difficulties in repatriation of their profits. So those are some of the additional things which he mentioned. But one thing very important he highlighted, which was highlighted by the monitoring team of the Security Council very recently, and that was that Afghan soil is being used for the terrorist acts in Pakistan. Now, lately we have seen that Pakistan also had taken action against that. The monitoring team, whatever they have written, that has further been testified and further been augmented by no one less than the Assistant
Right.
Secretary General. He did cite, the last point is, he did cite that whatever he is saying that has been stated already by the spokesperson of the State Department in terms of electoral process in Pakistan, in terms of the cipher controversy. So he quoted some of those occasions where the State Department was very candid and very clear in making its statement from time to time, and he dilated upon that. But he was grilled quite well by the members of the subcommittee, and subcommittee has its own importance. One thing good has happened, that the subcommittee didn't find the need of summoning what they call issuing the spina notices to the other citizens or the experts for testifying in the electoral roll, because in that case, perhaps they would have also dug out the report of the European Union and the report of the electoral observers, but they have not really
Right.
gone to that extent. Yes.
Right, absolutely. And I'll explore that further with you with regards to, of course, the way that different people have responded to this. But let us also welcome in the debate Mr. Anwar Iqbal, who's joined us on the telephone line. Thank you very much, Anwar Saab, for being part of the discussion. We're, of course, talking about what Donald Lu has said with regards to, of course, the cipher and also other matters relating to Pakistan. But first, your perspective on the cipher issue, of course, is something that the U.S. has denied repeatedly as well. And now, of course, the statement has once again clarified and denied the claims that were made previously by the PTI and have been continuing in the future as well. So I want your take on exactly what this would mean, particularly in terms of the way that the PTI again has come out and criticized the statement and has asked for an open investigation into the matter. What sort of issue do you think exists with regards to how this is being dealt with as part of the congressional hearing in the US, and then, of course, at home where the trial is going on?
I think I'm surprised at PTI's reaction, and actually I was surprised when the way they were pursuing it, because I never thought that it would be different than what actually happened yesterday. See, I have had the opportunity of discussing this with people on the Pakistani side, those who drafted the cipher, those who supervised the drafting, those who sent the cipher. Then I also spoke to the American side, people, American officials who were involved in this thing, who attended that luncheon and everything, and both sides were coming. Of course, there were things that were said that the Pakistan embassy felt the need to send a demarche to Islamabad, and that they felt that some of the things that were said should not have been said. But both sides agreed that there was no conspiracy, there was no US-sponsored move to topple the PTI government. And I always knew that by bringing it to Congress, actually calling a hearing on it, will ultimately hurt PTI, because obviously the congressmen were not going to stop Donald Lu from saying whatever he wanted to say. And this gave him a platform to come and share his views, and which he did. And he also talked about the debt that he said he and his family have been receiving from. He didn't say who the people were, but he was actually he said this at one point when the PTI people started shouting liar at him, and what he meant was this is the attitude that has led people to send him death threats. So I think PTI should now change its focus, because if it continues to bring pressure on Donald Lu, it will be counterproductive and it will hurt it, and it may ultimately lead to some people in America demanding that PTI, because it is its supporters, although it is not proven, but because its supporters are threatening a US official, so it should be declared a terrorist outfit. And that will really hurt PTI very bad. I know it will not be done, but even such a demand will hurt PTI. So I think PTI should now move away from focusing on this particular issue. And there are other issues that they should talk about, particularly the election rigging. I think there is a lot of sympathy in the United States, even in the Biden administration, for PTI on this issue, on election rigging, and they should focus on that.
Right, absolutely. But of course, this is something that the PTI has based a lot of their narrative on. And of course, this is again something that is being discussed. And there are calls, again, that are being made with regards to an open trial on this matter. Do you think that that's a possibility?
Open trial? I mean, in a court? I don't think so. I mean, what would they charge him with? I mean, suppose that PTI charges are like correct. So what they're saying is this man had a brief from his government, and he went and conveyed that brief to Pakistani diplomat. Now, is that a crime? I mean, that is what a diplomat is supposed to do. That's what a government official is supposed to do. Whatever he's asked by his masters, and in this country, the masters are obviously elected people, political people. So if they actually, which I don't think happened, but even if it did, so basically what he was doing was he was conveying what he was asked to convey to Pakistani diplomat. I don't think that's a crime.
Right. And Rishabh, I also want to explore with regards to what you talked about in terms of the elections. This is, of course, something that was mentioned by Donald Lu as well, but there has been a response by the Foreign Office saying that it's an indication of a misunderstanding of Pakistan's laws and internal matters. Others have also called out that this is a violation and an intervention in Pakistan's internal affairs. What do you think of the matter?
Well, congressional hearing is not an indication. But the United States is a superpower. The State Department, the Pentagon, and other departments in the government have various sections that deal with various regions, and Congress has committees and subcommittees that deal with those regions. And this kind of hearing happen all the time. Even this week, there were like 5 or 6 hearings on various countries and various regions. So there was a time in Pakistan when we were very close alive, and there was a war going on in Afghanistan. So Pakistan used to ask for similar hearings, because those hearings were often favored Pakistan. So that is not an interference. That's part of the routine. That is how the American democracy functions. Having said that, I think we will have a very hard time in convincing people, not only in America but across the globe, that our elections are totally fair and free. Our elections are not seen as fair and free anywhere. There have always been doubts about our elections, and those doubts remain. So we will have to, even if those elections, as the government claims, were fair and free, the government will have to prove that they were fair and free, and that is why the U.S. State Department also supports the demand for a probe into these allegations so that the truth comes out.
Right. Let me actually bring the question to another aspect that was quite intriguing yesterday, Anwar Saab. And we saw that, the subcommittee meeting did take place, but there were many members who were not, members of the committee, congressmen, rising stars of Democratic Party, Gabe Amo of Rhode Island, and then Greg Casar from Texas. They were not actually members of the subcommittee, but they also sat through. Is it a proof of how much importance they attach to Pakistan and Pakistani community, or something else is going on there?
It is a proof of the influence of the Pakistani community. like Greg Kassar comes from a constituency in Texas where there are a lot of Pakistani Americans settled, and they obviously lobbied on him. And similarly, there were people from other states who had who have large number of Pakistanis living in the area. Now, this is something that our government will have to learn to deal with. That Pakistani Americans are now here; they're well settled. Most of them are actually financially well off, and they have developed political influence in the American system, and they're ready to use that influence. So you will have to stay engaged with them. You will have to make sure that those are used in your favor. And if there is a situation like what it is today, then it can go anywhere. Then some will support the government, some will support the opposition parties. Anything can happen. So this is something that we need to make a strategy about, and we need to work on it.
Right. Thank you very much, Anwar Iqbal, for joining us and being part of the discussion.
Thanks.
Faisal, with regards to this particular hearing and, of course, the way that different people have been involved, I want to know with regards to the way that this impacts the relationship between both the countries and, of course, the way that different political statements were made earlier. I understand that the U.S. has always talked about the fact that this is not something that they have done. This is not something that they principally agree with. But in terms of the way that we've seen multiple reiterations of that matter, why do you think that it was necessary to do this again, and how important is this congressional hearing for the US and Pakistan relationship?
Yes, and obviously, by the looks of it, of course, we know that Pakistani citizens living in America, they are strong enough, and they are actually, they are able to bring somebody on the podium and face the justice. And of course, whatever the allegations they have, they are going along with it. And I think this is how the democracies play, and America has done the right thing. And of course, when we talk about the Donald Lu, he was present there and he answered all of the questions. And Sana, when we talk about both of the countries having sort of going through this kind of phase, this shouldn't have happened at all. Reason being that when we talk about Pakistan and US relations, they date back to 1947-48, and of course even before that, during Second World War, of course all of the leaders from this side as well, they were aligned with America, because majority of the leadership, Muslim leadership of later on Pakistan, they were studied in the British universities and all, so they were much closer to their values, democratic values, rather than anyone else's. So when it comes to cipher, the matter of cipher shouldn't have been highlighted the way it has been highlighted. Reason being, this was the first time that some diplomat from America actually talked to a Pakistani diplomat stationed in New York or Washington, and this wasn't the first time. And of course, when we talk about previously these sort of ciphers, they have always come to Pakistan. This is a sort of messaging how both of the countries are going along with, and there are a series of ciphers previously as well, but nothing has happened. Reason being, because we know that they were never taken sort of politically, and this was the first time that the cipher was taken politically. And obviously we saw that it was discussed in the political sermons as well, and the speeches that were made, there were exaggerations as well. I mean, there were points in them days, remember, we used to talk in our show as well, that the way it was handled, it was very wrong at that time to handle it this way. And that is why we are seeing that Donald Lu is still maintaining his previous verdicts, and whatever if he had done so, he is maintaining that. But there are certain aspects of it that, of course, countries, they do extend their sort of reservations about certain things, about not only Pakistan but other countries as well. Like, of course, we know that at that time Pakistan was actually extending a sort of meetings and talks with the Iranians as well. But the sort of influence Americans they have in the region. Of course, they have their own stakes. Of course, they are friendly and in a friendship with
let
the
me
Middle Eastern
actually
countries
try
as
to
well.
understand
Yeah.
a bit more about what you're saying. Are you saying that the US is trying to give assurances to other countries, or that other countries are also skeptical about what happened?
About what?
About the US's involvement in
No.
Pakistan affairs?
No. It's
Which
not.
other countries did you just point towards? You mentioned Iran, for example.
No, I mentioned Iran for a reason, and that is that Donald Lu himself mentioned Iran.
No, he did not. He was asked a question.
He was asked a question, and he did mention.
Michael.
Yeah, they have their own priorities when it comes to foreign policy. Related to Middle East, I mean Gulf countries, they have reservations. All of the Gulf countries, we know that they are sort of in alliance with the Americans, that they are on the side of Americans, and they have reservations against Iran. Iran is a threat for
But that was
rest of the Gulf
that was
countries
kind
as
of
well.
own goal by PTI, because
Right.
Yeah.
you knew
And
when there's going to be a hearing, it is not going to be only about elections.
Exactly.
And Michael lawyer actually particularly brought up this subject, and it became big.
Yeah.
It couldn't have been big had there not been this hearing.
Exactly.
And PTI is the party that wanted to merge once upon a time with a political party that is pro-Iran, and yet they brought this thing upon themselves.
Exactly, and when obviously we talk about this hearing, I mean this has cleared many of the thoughts. Of course, it was maintained previously that America wanted to, of course, influence Pakistan's
Whose thoughts
parliament.
exactly?
Political
Elements
PTI.
in
I'm talking
Pakistan.
about. In Pakistan.
So these assurances are still just coming in for PTI?
Yeah, I mean, this is a clear message for PTI that this is a wrong perception which they have created by themselves.
My question is, it has been done before. Why is there a need to reiterate this again?
It is needed to be reiterated. Reason being that their
For a
own
political
house,
party of a country.
their own house. I mean, they know that there is a huge, of course, Pakistani expats. They are living there, and they're very well settled, and they have influence in certain, constituencies.
Right. So the
and
target
they want to
audience
make
is,
sure
is the Pakistani public or the diaspora.
diaspora, of course, and
The
yes, they
voters.
want
Okay.
to, and
The
yes, they
voters.
want to maintain that America is a democratic country that actually have huge value for
Okay.
democracy throughout the world, and they will never be interfering in any of the democracies of the world. This
Right.
is what they're trying to do.
All right. Ambassador Saab, I'd like your perspective on that as well, in terms of whether or not this congressional hearing is going to be able to provide and fulfill this objective, and whether there is anything else aligned to this as well. We've, of course, seen previous statements being made earlier. Why is it that this is happening again? And add to that what I previously also wanted to focus on in terms of the issue of elections that, of course, have also been mentioned with regards to irregularities. And a lot of that, unfortunately, in international media has been exposed in a completely different way, that the US is talking about irregularities in elections, the US is meddling in Pakistan's affairs. Whether or not you think that is actually the case, or it's being blown out of proportion, I'd love to hear more on that.
Basically, there are two aspects to it. For number one, that United States, they would like to, preserve their own image, what they have about the democracy. And then in that case, whatever a diplomat like Donald Lu may make statements or testify, he would remain within that ambit. He did mention the United States, it respects Pakistan's sovereignty like any other country's sovereignty and the democratic principles. And whenever he was asked any question about the irregularities or the investigation, he responded to it in accordance with the law, in accordance with the law of the sovereign country, and he referred it to the election commission. Regardless of the fact that the opposition party, if they criticize the election commission for right or wrong thing, that's a different thing. But Donald Lu, so far, he is concerned and his country is concerned. They were very clear about it, and they remain within that ambit of it. Now, do they have any, authority, or do they have any moral authority to really criticize that? Well, since Pakistan invited the election observers, and election observers were they are the one, they issued a report, and their report by far they did not come up with very glaring negative things. It's just one of those common points some of those common points they narrated. And based on that, that those election observers, they could not uh, go and see the 50% of the counting. He did, while asked a question about the counting matter, he said that yes, counting, there seems to be some irregularity. And his statement was not, that the State Department directly observed something. It was based on one, that the election observers, two, that the media reporting, three, of course, the respective ambassadors, they write what we call telegram and cable, what they call the United States. And in that cable, some of these things are embedded. And they are not, they don't really come up with some anything, which is so concrete. About the value of this hearing, well, the congressional committees or the subcommittees do not have the authority of the trial. They have the authority of an oversight, they have an authority of an investigation, and based on their clarity of mind, they can make recommendations, or at the time of passing budget in favor of any country, they can then raise these points. Other than that, it's just an oversight on their own executives, such as this was a foreign committee subcommittee. So, an oversight on the foreign office, that whether they have been working within the ambit of the rules procedures, or they had crossed that. And then behind this entire proceedings, how it was convened, we all understand there are so many lobbying elements and entities. They are engaged by various parties, whether it was the previous political parties or the current political parties, particularly opposition parties, including PTI. They hire, and they have already announced that they hire the lobbyists. They do now. One of the Texas congressmen, he did mention that people from my constituency, they are sitting here, and that appears that they were these representatives, Congress, House of Representatives. They were well briefed by um, those people who had affiliations with the PTI, or who had their own perception about the elections. The election remained under some critiques, that we all understand it, but Donandu was very clear in his thought, and he gave an example of his 30 years ago. Once he was here, he gave the example that yes, there have been some observation irregularities, and then election commission was able to rectify that by either having a re-election, or by addressing those petitions or those grievances of the people around. So he remained within that, and at the same time, once he described about Iran, he was very clear that, and about the pipeline of Iran, he was very clear about it, and he made his own statements about it, that Pakistan has not yet asked for the waiver of the. So there were a complete, because within his domain, within his jurisdiction, whatever he could respond and whatever the foreign committee could ask, Donlu was able to respond to it. He seemed to have been very well prepared to whatever responses he
Right.
gave, and he gave in a very natural style what he has. Yes.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Jamil, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And Farrukh, I'm sure you have a very comprehensive analysis of all that has been discussed. But I want to add to that the factor of Pakistan's ambassador to the US as well, who was also unfortunately involved within this entire controversy, and who again has been asked by the PTI to come forward with a statement. Does he need to do that?
I don't think so, Sana, but I wanted to actually go back to the subcommittee's meeting, if you allow me.
Sure.
Because there are many observations that I wanted to actually bring forth, and I wanted to actually emphasize on that. One, it is never flattering that your country's internal matters are being subjected to any kind of congressional hearing. Usually when it comes to India, it doesn't happen like that. They usually have song and dance, and they keep on talking about how great that relationship is. So on one side, it actually showed me that what the wages of polarization in a country, that your own diaspora is working against your own country's national interest in many ways, because as I am going to point out, there were many issues that are very at the core of the national interest, and yet they were debated there as well. But there are two or three things which stand out. One, The tone of the subcommittee, I thought that it was very respectful, very kind, and I'm grateful that they, I mean, everybody just told us basically how much importance they attach to Pakistan, and that is a flattering thought. The second thing is, again, the enthusiasm that I pointed out, that many members of other committees were also sitting in. Then you talk about, this is a subcommittee, but there is a committee, Foreign Affairs Committee. Its chair was also sitting there, right? Senator, not senator, but actually Congressman Michael McCall actually framed the issue very well when he pointed out that America has limited options in Pakistan, because if it abandons Pakistan, Pakistan might actually go totally into the orbit of China, right? Then Michael Lawler, amazingly a Republican from New York, he, a young man, he also actually pointed out this Iran story and how this pipeline is being built. And that also showed this concern of the US that if it doesn't double down on supporting Pakistan as an ally, then it might be collected by many other countries. So Russia is there, Iran is there. So that I thought, because who other than PTI actually keeps on emphasizing policy, including engaging with Iran, with Taliban and Russia, it is PTI, right? So it was something that they brought upon themselves. But I saw a lot of enthusiasm. McCall was there, but Joe Wilson also spoke very kindly, who is the chair of this subcommittee. And the ranking member, Dean Phillips, right? He is actually a Democrat who just dropped out of the race against President Biden, right? And he was a challenger, but he was very kind too. And he particularly spoke about the economic matters as well, engaging Pakistan and how can you woo Pakistan. So I thought, on the other side, what was the behavior of PTI's attendants who was sitting there? One, very sad. There was disruption and 3 of them were asked to be escorted out. But then what happened was that I just mentioned Greg Kassar, who is actually a young whip of Progressive Caucus, which is the largest caucus now ever been of Progressive in the Congress. And he actually, when he misguidedly, I would say, actually tried to compare Pakistan with Venezuela, and that whatever actually was incurred upon Venezuela should be done with Pakistan. And there were clappings. I mean, what these people are sitting in the West, but their families must be in this country. Do you want Pakistan to be sanctioned like Venezuela, a rogue state? This was really, really troubling. And then they say that they want voting rights for the expatriates. And those expatriates have repeatedly started showing us that they don't care what happens to the homeland as long as their own leader is not in power. So that becomes a problem. It is going to hurt them, not us. And then I thought that it showed this overall, tone. And then again, I mentioned Gabe Amo. He is also a rising star. He used to be an assistant director in Biden administration of intergovernmental affairs, and now he is the lawmaker from Rhode Island. These people stood out, and they were kind of, because they are actually attaching value to Pakistan. But I hope that in coming days we can actually build on our expatriate communities' power rather than being trampled by it. Because in the past, this tone wasn't there. I remember Donald Trump's time, I remember Obama's time, that in committees, people would actually rebuke Pakistan, right? One man that again played to the gallery, and that is Brad Sherman. You know, he is an Indophile, but he is also in Pakistan, pro-Pakistan caucus. So he starts by actually bringing up Shakil Afridi, and I thought that it is going to be a controversial issue. And then somersault, and it becomes about Afia Siddiqui.
Exactly.
I said tip of the hat to the man because he knew how to play the whole thing, right?
Yeah, very smart.
But regarding overall situation, I think that Pakistan has, I keep on saying that Pakistan and US are among those few allies who have done a lot for each other. But there is incredible denial, and then there is fear also, because Indian lobby is very strong and they undermine anybody actively who has been pro-Pakistan. But the fact is, these countries have really bled out for each other. So why not actually build on that? And our community there should be helping us in ensuring and strengthening the relationship rather than actually being totally crazy. I mean, they are protesting in front of IMF. Do you want Pakistan to go bankrupt? Similarly, you are clapping when Venezuela is mentioned. Do you want Pakistan to be totally sanctioned to oblivion? If you don't care that much about this country, then why at all should I call you even member of my external community? Why shouldn't I say that you are also a foreigner who is actually working against the country?
Absolutely. And of course, these are factors that are that are part of this very important relationship, and we hope that they're also, of course, be taken into cognizance by the decision makers as well. We're now going to be taking a look at what is going on with regards to the investigation that has been done by New Delhi with regards to an attempted murder of a US citizen who is a Sikh, and this is of course something that the US has also called for repeatedly. And what has come out of the investigation is that what has been claimed by India is that rogue operatives were involved, and it has nothing to do with state elements. And Faisal, I want your take on this. And of course, this is something previously that we've discussed and we've talked at length about state involvement in such matters. And again, of course, the investigation points otherwise. But what do you think is the real deal?
Rogue Assassins Wing is the new word or new explanation of RAW we should be actually highlighting, which is being, of course, spearheaded by Modi. Modi is the guy who is actually, dictating all of these things, how to counter the Khalistan movement, how to counter, all of the movements which are within India. And this is how they have been, doing. And this one case of New York where, of course, CIA actually, or FBI guy actually, framed an Indian diplomat in there, and which obviously was being conducted through a hitman. The hitman was hired and everything. So that probe actually not only is the justification and confirmation about whatever they have done in Canada, whatever they have been doing in Britain, in Australia, all of these countries, they have been involved in these kind of activities. Suddenly, when they get caught red-handed in New York, then now, of course, India as a state is trying to disassociate itself from the people who got, of course, caught red-handed out there in New York. I mean, it was expected that they will be, of course, disassociating itself from them individuals. Now they're calling them by themselves. I mean, this actually investigation has been conducted by Delhi. And the Delhi report actually has mentioned all of these people as being rogue assassins who have nothing to do with the country's policies related to any movements or any members of movement living abroad. So this is fascinating, and that is why I have actually come up with a new name for RAW, and that is, of course, Rogue Assassins Wing, spearheaded by Modi himself, and of course backed by the ideology called Hindutva ideology that does not want anyone's existence in Hindustan other than Hindutva itself. They don't want Muslims, they don't want Sikhs, they don't want Christians, they don't want Dalits even, they don't want anyone, but they only want their own Hindutva ideology to persist in the country. And of course Modi and RSS and BJP, they will make sure that these assassins, rogue assassins wing, actually persist throughout the world, and they do their activities.
Right. I also want to explore, Farrukh, with regards to the way that this investigation, of course, is going to be deemed credible or not, and whether or not the US is going to actually accept this, given the fact that it's coming out of India. How then is this going to proceed forward as independent?
Right, Sana, A, it is not independent. B, it is not going to be accepted by the US. And C, it actually represents an amazing effort to scale, scapegoat a few individuals to save the rest. And amazingly, and this is what I'm going to say now regarding the commentary that I've just heard, that I love it when they actually prepare these juicy morsels for us, and then we actually chew them with taste and enjoy them, right? I told you that there is a split between intelligence agencies or deep state of India and their current government. They want actually, and I cannot believe that any of this was essentially an error of judgment or something was done which went awry. I think that this is essentially a framing effort by the own agencies so that attention comes to Modi and Modi comes under pressure because they want to get rid of him. And this has been very clear. I think that the intelligence agencies are very competent in certain aspects because all over the world, every intelligence agency from Mossad to ISI to CIA is mentioned, but RAW never figures in any conversation. That is essential effectiveness of subterfuge and how you hide things, right? So if they have done it, they essentially wanted to actually scapegoat Modi so that Modi goes and they get another government. What is this doing to Modi government? It is making them insecure. And what they have done in the result is they have actually closed down accounts of Congress party. Today you heard their heads actually practically crying about monies that are not there. On one side, electoral bonds have made BJP a rich fat cat. On the other side, they don't have it. Similarly, they are bringing in a law to actually ban YouTube's content creators as well. So they are actually making mistakes about again and again, and this is going to blow in their face. The only way to counteract this kind of negativity created by the intelligence agencies is to reach out to Pakistan and start building peace before the elections. With that, all these things will go away, but the only problem is that instead, if you choose to make these mistakes, which become so open secrets that media, Congress is not on media, or Banerjee, Mamata Banerjee is pushed by one of her staff upon your request. That kind of thing is going to create a boomerang among the people, and the intelligence agencies know how to actually manipulate the voters to ensure the outcome which is not to your taste.
Right, absolutely. Thank you, Farrukh. Thank you, Faisal, for joining us as always as part of the debate. That's all we have from the show. We'll now see you tomorrow.